So in the last lesson, we looked at circular trigonometry. In other words, drawing angles within a circle. And we're really thinking about the coordinate plane because we can draw a circle around the coordinate plane. Now, when we're working with these, we're still going to be thinking about triangles. So if we think about a point here, this distance would be my x value, this distance would be my y value, and we can think of this line as the hypotenuse for that right triangle. And we're going to call it R. Think about Pythagorean theorem. We would have x squared plus y squared equals r squared. We can also set up our trig ratios. So here's the angle. Sine of theta is opposite over hypotenuse, so y over r. Cosine would be adjacent over hypotenuse, so x over r. And tangent would be opposite over adjacent, so y over x. Now, depending on the location of the terminal side of the angle, these functions will either be positive or negative. So let's think about our quadrants. So we have quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. In quadrant 1, our values, so our x and our y, are positive and positive. Over here, the x values are negative, the y values are positive. Down here, they're both negative. And in the fourth quadrant, x values are positive and y values are negative. So in quadrant 1, both my x's and y's are positive. So I'm going to have a positive, and for our sake, r is always going to be positive. So positive divided by positive, sine will be positive. Positive, positive, cosine will be positive. Positive, positive, tangent will be positive. In quadrant 2, x is negative and y is positive. So positive, so sine would be positive. Cosine has an x there, so that would be negative. Tangent would be a positive divided by a negative. That's negative. Quadrant 3, both are negative. So negative divided by positive, negative divided by positive, but negative divided by a negative, tangent would be positive. In quadrant 4, x is positive, y is negative. So negative, positive, and then that would be negative divided by positive, that would be negative. So some people abbreviate this, all students take calculus, so all of them are positive in first quadrant. Only sine, so S, T is positive in quadrant 3, C in quadrant 4, so A, S, T, C. If cosine is greater than 0, which quadrant would the terminal side lie? Well, cosine is greater than 0, so that means it's positive. That'd be quadrant 1 or quadrant 4. Because in those two locations, cosine is positive, and that would be my x is positive. So one way to remember this is your cosine kind of goes with the x's, and sine kind of goes with the y's. And a way to remember that is x comes before y in the alphabet, and c comes before s. If tangent is negative, which quadrant would it lie? So if tangent is negative, then that means one of them is negative, but the other one is positive. So that would be 2 and 4. Secant is negative. Well, let's remember, secant was the reciprocal of cosine. So secant is the same as 1 over cosine. It's the reciprocal of cosine. We would have flipped it. So if secant is negative, that means cosine would also be negative. So which quadrants would cosine be negative? Well, cosine goes with the x's, so that'd be 2 and 3. Sine is less than 0, and cotangent is greater than 0. Well, cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So this is kind of saying sine is less than 0. So that means the y is less than 0. And tangent is greater than 0. Now, tangent is y divided by x. So y divided by x would be greater than 0. So it's positive. But y is negative. So what would happen to have y divided by x be positive? Well, they both have to be negative, which would be quadrant 3. Now, in these next ones, we're going to be given an angle, and we're going to try to find all of our trig ratios. So, 5, negative 3. And they're using alpha instead of theta, but that's okay. So we got 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Here's the point 5, negative 3. And what I'm going to do is, so alpha is really this triangle that's going around. But what we're going to use is we're going to use a right triangle drawn to the x-axis. This side is 5. It's positive 5. This side's going down 3, so I'm going to put negative 3. Our hypotenuse is always going to be positive. So x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So x squared, that's 5 squared plus negative 3 squared equals r squared. So I got 25 plus 9 equals r squared. That would be 34 equals r squared. So r equals the square root of 34. And now it wants us to find all of our trig functions. So all of our trig functions, we'll start with sine, and it's alpha, cosine alpha, tangent alpha. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So sine, opposite over hypotenuse. So this is the square root of 34. So negative 3 over the square root of 34. Cosine would be 5 over the square root of 34. Tangent would be opposite over adjacent, so negative 3 over 5. To find the other 3, we just flip them. Now let's look at this next one. So negative 3, negative 2. So I'm going in the negative direction to get to my point. So I'm still going to draw my triangle to the x-axis. I'm connecting it to the x-axis, and we're looking at this reference angle. Now alpha would technically be this one. But we only want to look at this right triangle. So this is negative 3 because we moved in the negative direction, 3 steps, and negative 2. I need to find my hypotenuse. So negative 3 squared plus negative 2 squared equals r squared. 9 plus 4 equals r squared. So 13 equals r squared. R equals the square root of 13. So can you fill in all of your trig ratios? Now what's going to happen on tangent? Opposite over adjacent, and they're both negative, so it's going to be positive. On our reciprocals, all we're going to do is flip it. Now let's do one with a little bit more information. It's giving me the value for sine, and that's negative, and tangent is negative. So if tangent is negative, that means they need to be opposite signs. So positive divided by negative or negative divided by positive. So sine goes with my y value. So the y value is negative, but cosine would have to be positive. So if we remember this is to be positive, positive, negative, positive, negative, negative, positive, negative. So sine is the y, and if tangent is negative, then they have to be opposite signs. So we're in quadrant 4 because y is negative and x is positive. Because y divided by x is negative. Draw and label the reference triangle for alpha and find the other 5 trig ratios. Okay, so we know we're in quadrant 4, so that my triangle is going to be going like this. And this is my reference triangle. This is my reference angle. Reference angle always goes to the x-axis. And if sine is negative 3 over 5, then this is negative 3 over 5. I need to find my other side, and that would be the x side. X squared plus 9 equals 25. X squared equals 16. X equals, now it could be positive or negative, but look at where it is on the graph. We know that x has to be positive, so this is a 4. And they asked me to find the other trig ratio. So we already knew sine was negative 3 over 5. Cosine would be 4 over 5. Tangent would be negative 3 over 4. And my others would just be the reciprocals.